Welcome to another edition of the Royal Alliance UK podcast, episode number 100. Ton up, boys! I'm Matthew Turner alongside my co-host Tom Wilkinson and special guest from Pride of Detroit at Detroit Online, Jeremy Reisman. How are you doing, guys?
Doing great. Happy to be here for a special occasion.
Yeah, we should have got a cake or something. I don't know what we're doing to celebrate, but other than obviously Jeremy, you being here, but no cake, sadly.
The mustache.
They call me the human cake.
Exactly. Yeah.
I got rum. I can offer rum. So
yeah, sure.
Celebrate, right? We got to with all the COVID happening over here, over there. Drinking is always available. So right, but we can also talk about Lions football, which we will do in just a moment. Cardinals at Lions on Sunday. We're going to kick off with a quick little interview with Jeremy, but let's just start by saying Discord channel's still open, so please join us there. Very active during game day all through the week about Lions and soccer and sport in general and whatever. So come and join us there. DM us on Twitter, which is open. We'll give you a link. We have got the college football podcast, so that aired yesterday. They were talking about bowl games. They were talking about Army, Navy, and all that sort of stuff. Go and check that out. We also talked to Herman Moore for 20 minutes yesterday. That was a really good little short interview, so you want to check that out as well. Don't forget to like and sub on our YouTube channel, on Twitch, on this episode. That really helps out. And Lions Nation Unite, you need to download that app. It's going to be the next big thing in Lions fandom. Let's kick off our little interview with Jeremy. And I did a little digging. With most guests I like to do, I like just to get to know the person, because
Sure.
I feel like I've been a fan of the show for, as long as I discovered that podcasts were a thing, which I think happened like 3 years ago for me. And yet, you listen to all of these guys and you kind of almost come in halfway through the story and it's like the rapport's already there and you're like, okay, well, I can just go with this. But how did it all start? So I found out that you have a BA in psychology from U of M, which I did not anticipate whatsoever. And then you started out your career as a behavioral therapist, which is amazing. So you went from there to the Love Dog, and you were a Lions blogger for a while, and then joined Pride of Detroit. And the first question which occurs to me is, what was the impetus moving from... I'm guessing you went to U of M and were in-state, and maybe you were a Lions fan beforehand, so that would have already been a thing. But what made the transition into journalism for you? How did that happen?
I just kind of fell into it a little bit, honestly. Like Pride of Detroit had always kind of been a part of my life since I didn't start Pride of Detroit. I don't know how many people know the history of the website, but Sean Ewell is the guy who originally started it. I don't even know how long ago it was, but that was kind of my go-to site. It was a way for me to connect with Lions fans virtually. And so I kind of always had my eye on that site. And I really started writing in 2008, just kind of as a hobby during the 0-16 season, just kind of, I call it as like a form of self-therapy, like just kind of getting your way through the season. And Pride of Detroit has always had a section called fan posts where you could write, articles or analysis or whatever you want in a little fan post section. And so that year I developed a preview, which became my on paper preview that I still do to this day, actually. And Sean noticed it and was like, hey, I kind of like it. And, as the managing editor of the website, you have the option of putting it on the front page of the site so that people, normally the fan posts are on a right column. You probably miss them if you're not looking for them, but you can put them on the front page. And he started putting some of those on the front page. And eventually he asked me like, hey, do you want to just write for the front page? I can't pay you anything, but it's exposure. And I'm like, sure, why not? Like, that more exposure, it'd be fun to see people read my writing. And so I did that. And so, I never really went through a formal education with journalism and things like that. So it just, from there on, it grew and grew. And once I kind of got my foot in the door, I kicked the door open and I wanted to do more. I wanted to do film analysis. I wanted to do statistical analysis. I wanted to write, any kind of stories I could about the Lions, because as you mentioned, I grew up here in Michigan and have we had season tickets as a family when I was a kid. So I've always been a Lions fan. And so, just having a taste of it, like it was always in the back of my mind that maybe this could be something I could do for a living. I just didn't really know what exactly it was. At one point, I think I wanted to be an announcer, but I didn't really feel like I had the verbal communication to be able to do that, or the cadence needed to do that. Writing,
I don't know. I think you could beat out Mark Sanchez, to be honest.
That's a fair point. But yeah, even writing early on, wasn't my strong suit. I was actually really good at math in school, and so I went through my whole educational thing, just kind of floating, trying to figure out what I do. I as you mentioned, I found psychology because I feel like that's everybody's kind of fallback major here in the States. Is just like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I guess I'm interested in people, so psychology. And that's what I did. And, I enjoyed the work that I did, as you mentioned, as a behavioral therapist, working with children with autism for about 5 years. But it's also very tough work. And eventually I got burnt out on it. And so, again, I kind of went wandering again. I was still doing all the writing in the background. I managed a dog daycare center, as you alluded to, for a few years. And eventually, when Sean stepped down, I had been doing enough work for the website that I was the first guy that he recommended for the job. And as soon as that door opened up, that's when I was like, okay, I should really be taking this seriously now. I should really be doing everything I can, because this is a very unique opportunity. I mean, there weren't really any other Detroit Lions blogs out there that had the reach that Pride of Detroit did at the time. So I recognized that it was a really important, really big platform, and I didn't want to squander the opportunity. And so, I was actually living out in Los Angeles at the time when I took over. But then I was really trying to pound on the Lions door and see if we could get access. And then we did in 4 years ago, the last year of Jim Caldwell's era. And I was still in California for that. And I was just like, I think I should probably be back in Michigan. If they're giving us access to games and press conferences and things, I need to be there. And so I moved back to Michigan the next year, and it's kind of been, history since. It's been a weird, wild ride, and it's definitely not, the normal route to being a journalist, being a sports writer, being whatever you want to call me at this point. But I'm thankful for it. And I think there was some luck involved, but obviously I also made sure that when I had the opportunities, I didn't squander them.
Incredible amount of hard work off your own back. That's really impressive. And obviously Pride of Detroit has changed massively since you joined. So the YouTube channel launched shortly after you joined. Then I presume probably very soon after you became managing editor, the POD cast started back up. I know it kind of flamed out really early on. It kind of didn't do much at all. And then Chris, I think it was Chris, probably started it off in September 2015. Now you're really active doing Twitch and Discord too. And the amount of stuff that you do, the number of articles is incredible, insane. Now, I assume that you've got a lot pre-written for in the morning, because when I wake up in the morning, there's something new that's just dropped, and it's like 4 in the morning in the US. How is this happening? What's the biggest change since you've been at the organization, do you think? And what's the most enjoyable part of the job right now? Because obviously it used to just be all writing, and now, I mean, it's probably a lot still writing, but it seems to be so much more. You're doing a podcast, I don't know, sometimes it seems like every other day, maybe more. So
I think you guys are outdoing us at this point, but I mean, but yeah, no, I think you're onto it something there, because I think one of the things when I took over, I immediately recognized that the landscape was changing, right? Like you said, it wasn't just writing, and I didn't want to ever lose the writing part, and we try not to. I mean, we're trying to put out at least 7-8 articles a day during the season. Just because we know that's still where the majority of our content gets consumed. But we noticed, all the live streaming platforms that seemed like a really good opportunity. The podcast was the first move that we had to do. And Chris was instrumental in that, because it was interesting when I took over as managing editor of Pride of Detroit at the time. We also had a slew of 6 or 7 new hires for Pride of Detroit. And that was Sean. I think at that point he knew that he was going to leave, and so he tried to fill his spot with as many people as possible. But at the same time, that was me I have a whole slew of people I need to manage that I don't even know yet. And so Chris was really adamant about starting a podcast, and I thought that was a good idea, and so we did. I wasn't even a part of it at the time, because I was just I'm in over my head right now. I don't know what I'm doing. And eventually I was listening to him that sounds like fun. I want to be a part of it. And I just kind of elbowed my way into there, and was I need to be part of this. I feel like this is where the future is going. And then, so we did the podcast for a while. There was no live element to it. There's no video element to it. But then that sort of stuff exploded. I think it started with Facebook Live. We started doing pregame and postgame shows on Facebook Live, and that was really fun. But Facebook, not my favorite audience, if I'm going to be completely honest. So whenever anything else emerged, there was Twitter for a while. What's the Periscope for a while? I think we tried that. And then eventually we landed on Twitch about 3 years ago, and that has been our home since. We do YouTube stuff. We upload our Twitch broadcasts to YouTube, but Twitch, for whatever reason, it just seemed like the right fit for us. It's still kind of a tight knit community. We're not getting the numbers we would have on Facebook Live because Facebook is obviously huge, but I think we found the right character of people that we want to be talking to, the right audience, the right niche, which is hard to do, and it's been extremely rewarding. I think, and to answer your question, what's been the most rewarding? I think it's kind of been that live broadcast Twitch thing, because it's so much fun. It's a way to interact with people on a level that you don't really get to through writing or even podcasting, because there's just a live element to it. And, we can do a whole bunch of fun things. A couple of years ago, we were doing live karaoke on our Twitch channel, which is crazy. We played Fortnite with Graham Glasgow a couple times.
You did that just recently, right? You for the charity stream, you had him on.
Yeah. Our 15-hour charity stream that we did a couple of weeks ago. Graham was a part of it, and honestly, like, the pandemic also helped that out a lot, because live streaming just became a huge thing. Zoom became a huge thing, so now we can do these interviews with big people like Dane Brugler, who's a guy I didn't even think would ever return my Twitter DM. We got to talk to him about the draft a couple of weeks ago, and Twitch has been like perfect for the entire thing. And stuff like YouTube like offers all the same things, but for whatever reason, Twitch really resonated with us and has been awesome for us. And so I'm happy to see you guys on Twitch. I want to always try to push your guys' stuff, because I think there's always so much room for a lot of different voices here in Lions fandom, and Twitch is really, I think, an untapped market for a lot of people.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the Lions are really blessed with so many good content guys. I mean, I know you've been on Luke G's stream, and he's really helped bring us along in this sort of format. Actually, on Twitch, and the way that you guys do it, you take fairly frequent breaks, and the breaks seem to sometimes be longer than the podcast, with you guys just chatting and chatting to the audience. It's how did you come up with that as a format? Like, we just kind of go straight through, and I mean, I realize some part of that is that you want sometimes to get some sponsors in, but if you wanted to do that, you could just go to break and then immediately come back and insert it in. You don't have to stop for half an hour and just chat amongst yourselves. And then the scraps came in, and that was a really great addition. I know that Chris is super busy with Fox and what have you, so that hasn't made an appearance every week. But that was terrific. I loved listening to that when I wasn't able to join in live. So how did you come up with it?
That's a great question, because in the early days of the podcast, we didn't really know what we wanted to be, because there's a lot of really good podcasts out there. The Detroit Lions podcast, I think they're kind of more like a radio show. Eric's the Detroit Lion Breakdown is very like informational, and like, this is what happened this week, and then like, we were trying to be like, we want to be smart and analytic, but we also want to have fun. And Chris and I would kind of butt heads a lot of times, where I'm like, I want to be more analytical. I'm the sports writer. I want to like talk about this and this and this. And he's like, let's be a little more loose. Let's be funnier. Let's be SB Nation, a fan site, and be silly. And so I think we finally found this happy medium with Twitch, where like, we can be pretty serious and stay on topic during the podcast. But during those breaks, we can be silly. We can talk about food. We can talk about movies. We can talk about our favorite TV show, I Think You Should Leave, and just like go off. And then now we have these two separate podcasts. Like you said, we have the informational regular POD cast, and we have the scraps, where we're just talking about whatever the hell comes to mind. And we still try to keep it kind of light on both sides. But I think it that worked out in a really good sense that made both Chris and us happy, because we were kind of struggling to figure out what our voice was.
But it makes it so distinctive, the difference between audio and live. So I'll edit this when we're done, put it up, and it will be pretty much exactly as you see on YouTube on the audio format. For you guys, it's completely different.
Yeah.
It's a really kind of different experience. It's great.
Right. And that's also, it's also trying to incentivize more people to come to the live audience, because they can, I think it is a little bit more of a fun experience if you're there in the chat, and you can guide the conversation. You can make us do a list cast of our favorite things using channel points on Twitch. And so, yeah, it's a way to kind of feed both beats, because podcasts, I think, people have to realize that podcasts are a very intimate form of art for some people. Like they want to feel like they're your friends that you're listening to. And in a lot of ways they are. And I think Twitch kind of reaches people in that kind of intimate way, in a way that just, listening to a podcast might not necessarily accomplish.
Similar kind of sort of in-between feeling between YouTube and an audio pod in terms of how it makes someone feel. I totally get that. I've talked for a while, Tom. I know you had quite a few questions, so maybe one occurs to you that's relevant here.
Yeah, I guess you were talking about your time, and obviously you've seen a few different regimes and things like that. And obviously you talk about your prior work being very different to this. I guess I'm intrigued as to how much the atmosphere in the building and in the franchise at each time really impacts on you and the team. So for example, now, sure, we don't have many wins, but everyone's in a pretty good mood. All things considered. This time last year, well, a little bit earlier than this time last year before Thanksgiving, it was not the case, right? So I imagine that really takes a toll on your team as well, to be honest.
No question. I mean, I can really tell the character, if you're just talking about the people at Pride of Detroit, I can really tell the character of the people at the Pride of Detroit that can still push out writings this time of year. And it's certainly made easier by it being year one, by Dan Campbell being a very entertaining guy, and really the entire coaching staff being, really entertaining, interesting people. But yeah, if you can push out content and still be entertaining and all that sort of stuff in December, in the middle of a 1-11 year, in the middle of a 3-13 year, whatever it is, it's impressive. And yeah, like you said, the culture has been completely different, and some of it's hard to tell, right? Because 2 years ago we were in locker rooms and you could see, a lot of times we'd come out after practice or come after a game and go into the locker room after one of those Matt Patricia losses, and there would just be no one there. It'd be crickets. You'd talk to the same guy every week because everyone's just like, I'm getting showered and I'm getting the hell out of there. And it's tough to deal with. It's tough for that not to rub off on you too. I mean, the season is a marathon, and even now it does feel like we're kind of grinding to like find the interesting story here, when, I mean, there's just so many new faces that aren't probably going to be around next year, that I don't know how many people are interested. And the ones that are sticking around, I mean, we talked to Evan Brown today for, I feel like, what was the 10th time in the past month, which, I mean, he's a backup center. Like he's actually really good in the media and tells some interesting stories, but it can be really tough this time of year. And that's all made all the more tough by, a regime that's not very fun, that doesn't give you very much in front of a podium. And so I definitely am thankful. I really enjoy our Thursdays because we get to talk to the coordinators, and I think Aaron Glenn's press conferences are can't miss every week, because I learn something from him every single time he steps in front of the podium. And so I still have a little bit of energy, but it's getting to that point where, like, we're already talking about draft rumors. I'm just like, oh boy.
Oh, your favorite subject.
When's your first mock coming out? Is it the week or next week, or
I'm thinking maybe 2026. Maybe I'll finally break down then.
I've got a question from Dan, who's one of your biggest supporters, I think.
Sure.
And he says he's asking for a quick list cast, which we've never done one, but you're familiar with them. He has said, at Roll the Lions, what are your top 5 sports films? We didn't hear Jeremy's or something to that effect, actually. It's moved up somewhat now, but he says he likes the original Mean Machine with Richard Kiel. I don't really do films, so this is really hard for me. Like, I much prefer TV shows, and I'll watch the old film, but, I mean, Rocky has to be up there, right? Like, you can't avoid several of the Rocky films. Potentially 1 and 2 are masterpieces. Senna has to be up there. Remember the Titans, Coach Carter. Any massive ones that I'm missing? What's up there? The long. I don't know. I'm just thinking my reputation for a lot of them.
Yeah, the conversation we had on our podcast on this was like, I don't really like sports movies, because to me they never really live up to the excitement of the actual thing. Like, I don't know how you can recreate something like just 2 weeks ago, the Lions winning their first game. How do you recreate that on screen? I don't think you can. No. Because everything's, in Hollywood just kind of seems to follow a formula that you get used to. And a lot of times you already know the story, right?
Okay, so Rocky is basically Lions Baltimore this season.
Sure, yeah.
It was a glorious defeat. And while you're here, got any questions for Jeremy?
No, I'm sure you've gone over them while we've been here. I know how much of a fan you are, so I trust you to have covered all bases.
My favorite bit was, Jeremy, as you were talking about being light-hearted comedy, and came on in a dark car looking as much like a bouncer as I've ever seen him. And I was slightly worried for all of us for a minute.
Oh man,
going for an adventurous background.
Yeah, right. How was the bar this evening?
Quiet, not been too bad. So hey ho, it is what it is. But I was never going to miss episode 100, so don't worry about that.
Actually, something I wanted to come on to because it's something perhaps we don't fess up to all the time. But what in the history of you supporting the team, what's the most unpopular Lions opinion you've held?
Ooh, you know what? And this is not going to be a great look for me personally, but I thought Matt Patricia deserved a third season. I did. I thought he deserved to really. I didn't think the roster was particularly good after 2 years. I thought he deserved at least one more shot at getting the roster. And I understand, like, we look back now and it's like that was a pivotal year when the Lions could have potentially gotten a quarterback and could have turned the page a year early, and they'd be 1 year ahead of the rebuild at this point if they were. But I don't know, like I think we also we look at like the Urban Meyer situation, be like the red flags were there from the beginning. I don't necessarily think there were that many red flags right at the beginning with Matt Patricia. There were obviously some, like there was a whole running thing when he started, and then but like really all the stories that we got about Matt Patricia really came in right after he was fired. Like all the former players were just like saying everything, and so it wasn't as clear to me at the time that had reached such a toxic level. And I think if I knew that, then I would have been fine with firing him, like a lot of fans I think were after year two. But in general, I do think it's smart to preach some patience with new head coaches. And this is a topic that we're probably going to get into in the next year or two when, the rebuild still isn't completely done with Dan Campbell and they're still losing games maybe next year. But I do feel like there needs, as long as you aren't pulling an Urban Meyer and you aren't like completely turning the locker room and the culture in the wrong direction, I do feel like sometimes it takes 2-3 years to really get the plan in place, get the players that you want in place. And so at the time I thought, let's just see it out. Like let's give him an opportunity to win or lose his job. And that's what the Lions did. And we are where we are now. And so whether it was the right or wrong decision, I guess is up for everyone else to decide. But at the time I did think it was the right decision.
And I think it's hindsight as well to a degree, because even the whole Quandre Diggs, Darius Slay thing, I kind of got past, and actually I didn't really want to pay Slay, and he's the guy who's on the back of my jersey I've got. He's my favorite player. But we'd reached that point where actually I was worried he was on the downturn. I was happy with that decision. Right. And similarly, coming into the 2020 season, I think everyone, even as a fan or anyone in the world, feels like 2020 kind of punched them in the face. And I felt like the team was coming together quite nicely. As in, roster it wasn't a Super Bowl champ, but I was like, maybe we can do something this year. A lot of the things around kind of social injustice, it really felt like that team was pulling together. So actually, I felt pretty positive in a similar way going into 2020. And then that first game of the season is the most demoralized I've been coming out. So it's easy to look back and say, yes, no one wanted Patricia, etc. But I was in a similar place, at least in the preseason leading up to 2020. I felt a lot more positive than I did, kind of 4 quarters in, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right with you. So I thought that he deserved a third season, mainly because I was kind of like, I'm 80% sure this is going to fail, maybe more, but it's not 100% of fail. And the thing is, if we tear this down, it's not going to be pretty. So it's going to be better than that. And if it goes to pot, well, we've lost 1 season. But what's 1 season since 1957? Like, let's try it. I mean, it's actually something we're going to get onto later. But Cliff Kingsbury entered this season, I think, pretty firmly on the hot seat. So a guy who last year had flattered to deceive. They got out to this really hot start, not too dissimilar to this season, and then they went to absolute hell. And actually entered this season going, well, if he isn't above 500 at the very least and probably making the playoffs at worst, he might be gone. And yet we're talking about the team with the joint best record in the NFL. So, I mean, what more can you say? Now, I think you could say that the scheme wasn't entirely translating. The roster wasn't particularly good to begin with. There were mitigating factors there. And with Patricia, I think it's absolutely obvious to me that he was excellent at keeping his cards close to his chest. He never gave anything away in his interviews, but also with his team. You could see that he had them disciplined very, very well, which is why it all came out after he'd left. That was all part of the machine that he was running. So it is not strange to me at all that he ran a very tight ship. And then it's not strange to me at all that Dan Campbell comes in and says, well, but they've left us high quality, high character guys. Like, well, yeah, that's what they prized almost as highly as really slow linebackers. So,
True.
Yeah, I absolutely was on board with keeping him for a third year. It felt like the least worst decision.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And then, yeah, I like Tom said, I think a lot of us are using hindsight at this point and saying like, no, you guys, it was obvious after 2 years, like it wasn't working. Well, I feel like everyone's drinking the Kool-Aid in the beginning of 2020 and thinking like, listen, we finally got healthy, right? Like that's the thing that everyone loves to say at the beginning of the year, like, oh, we're finally healthy. Well, everyone's healthy at the beginning of the year. And so, and I think the thing that really kept me going too is the flashes that we would see every year. Is like that Miami game that they played on the road where they ran the ball a ton. They played good defense. They beat the Patriots. They beat the Packers. Like they have these those flashes every now and then during Patricia's reign that really made you feel like they could just do that more consistently. And that's the difference between a good and a great team is just consistency. And so you saw the game plan work at times. You saw the vision that he was going for work. You just didn't see it consistently. And then obviously all the locker room stuff that we figured out afterwards was all that we figured out afterwards. So it's I'm glad to hear that I wasn't completely alone, at least in this room, in that, because I do feel like I got buried for that one a little bit a few months later.
I mean, we're here now, so oh well.
Right.
Just asking for any more questions from the guys live, but there were a couple in advance from Ash on our Discord. The first one was, who is your favourite player to interview, or has been your favourite player to interview or do a presser with? And if he takes easy answer of Jamal, push him for another.
Okay, yeah, Jamal has to be up there, right? Like he's been on our podcast a few times, and he's just like he's always on, and it's weird because you ask players, you assume like a guy like that is on in front of the camera, right? Once the cameras are on, that's when he's being silly and stuff. But you ask his teammates, like, no, that's just him. Like he's like that 100% of the time, and just kind of crazy. Now, if I were to give another answer, and this would kind of go in a different direction, Glover Quinn was extremely fun to talk to in a completely different way. He would literally, he made it so we would only be able to talk to him once per week. He would make, I don't remember if it was Wednesdays or Thursdays, but he would sit there for the entire 45 minutes that we got in the locker room and just answer questions. And just, I mean, you could understand why he was the player that he was, because just wise beyond his years. Just, you'd ask him anything and he'd give you a long, thorough answer. You'd always learn something about the game talking to him, and just a very affable person who like would never take a question the wrong way and be offended by a question. You could literally ask him anything, and I don't think he would ever take offense to it. And so that's exactly the kind of guy you want, where you could just like sit down there for 45 minutes and listen. And that's like, I don't want to hear the sound of my own voice when I'm talking to someone. I want to hear them. And so he's a guy that, sometimes I wouldn't even be asking the questions. I'd literally just be standing there with my recorder, just like, I don't want to listen to anyone else. They're not giving me the kind of answers you are. And so Glover Quinn to me is a guy that I still currently miss in the locker room because he just made me a smarter football fan.
And now he talks lines as well. So, there's that too. There's loads of questions in Twitch actually for you, so maybe I'll go into a couple. First one's a bit more of a flippant statement. Ask him if he'll bite into an onion for us. I did watch that. That was horrific.
Thank you.
Derek Bobarak says, what have you seen this season that gives you the most hope for the future of this team?
I mean, I feel like this has been my answer since training camp, and it's the coaching staff. I really like the coaching staff. I really like the development of these young players. They aren't playing crazy well, but I mean, just like a guy like Jerry Jacobs, that I don't know if he has any kind of success anywhere else this year. I feel like he landed in the perfect spot for himself, not only because the opportunity was there, but because of a guy like Aaron Glenn and Aubrey Pleasant. Like, they're doing kind of wonders in that secondary. And I know if you look at all the stats, they don't look great, passer rating, yards per attempt, all that sort of stuff that the Lions are dead last in, or, bottom 5 in. But you look, I mean, if you just watch those games, you see how hard these guys are fighting. And Jerry Jacobs, like, he looks like he could potentially be a CB2 in this league, like a starter. And that to me is just, that speaks incredibly of a coaching staff to be able to do that with a guy, and to Jacobs himself. Like, you have to give the player a ton of credit for working his butt off from being a guy who's barely going to make the practice squad to a guy who's capable of starting. But I look across the board, even, the wide receiving core is starting to come together. The running backs that we're seeing, 4 or 5 deep that are playing well. Brock Wright is a guy, Ben Johnson is getting spoken of very highly by Jared Goff, a guy who, thinks the world of him right now, thinks he's going to be an offensive coordinator. I think it's interesting. Like, I feel like the Lions are kind of a farm team right now for players and for coaches. Like, they're developing these guys into better coaches, developing these players into better players. And to me, that's the sign. Like, that's how you get long-term success, right? Is you have these guys that can churn out, production out of guys that don't necessarily expect it. And so, as long as they can get some of these top tier guys, these game changers, like a guy like Penei Sewell that they've already proven they can get in, if they hit on some of these top draft picks, I'm starting to think, like, some of these guys that they're developing, a lot of them, people are saying, who are these guys? They're not even going to be part of this team. Well, they could be part of their depth. Like, depth is just as important, because you get to this time of year and let's say you're 8-3 instead of 11-1 or whatever it is. Like, these are the depth guys that are going to be playing for you, because every team gets injured this time of year. And so you're going to need guys like Jerry Jacobs on your roster. You're going to need guys like AJ Parker on your roster, who might not be starters in the future, but if they can come in at the end and end of the season and fill in a guy, whether it's for COVID or flu or whatever injury, like, you need those depth players. And so once Lions get those premier starters, I think they're starting to churn the bottom of that roster to be a really strong unit that can come in and come in seamlessly, because we're seeing what Jerry Jacobs and AJ Parker can do at the beginning, but how are they going to look once they come into training camp already knowing the system, already knowing what's expected of them? They can reach in a level that we're not seeing even right now. So I think there are some players to still watch through these last 4 games that they could be a part of these teams' future, even if they're not starting.
One of the most exciting things, I think, is it's the young guys I didn't really have expectations for who have really kicked on. Take Iffy, for example. I remember watching him back in January at the Senior Bowl, and technically he was loose, let's say. Amazing athlete, but loose.
Yeah.
And I thought he was going to get torn to shreds. Similar with Jerry Jacobs, his first reps on the field, he was all over the place. The speed of development, and even going all the way to Penei, he was struggling with a lot early on, but he wasn't making those same mistakes again and again. And it's that kind of development with the guys, which I think is most impressive.
For sure.
Yeah.
And to add to that, like, I'm consistently wowed by the culture, and I know culture doesn't necessarily matter. And I know a lot of people kind of shoo it away and say, like, you know what? I don't like you can have a Matt Patricia as long as you're winning, but even I was
or an Urban Meyer
or an Urban Meyer, like, I do believe that there are different, you don't have to have like this kind of, kumbaya holding hands type of environment to get it to work, but there needs to be obviously some sort of harmony. You have to have everyone pushing in the same direction. But listening to the Chris Spielman interview that he did with the ESPN reporter for the Cardinals, just how selfless of a guy that is, it really feels like they have a room of selfless people in every part of the building now. He talks about, he doesn't want to be a general manager. He doesn't want to be a head coach. He's literally in there to just help everyone do their jobs better. He's at their service. And it does feel like everyone is kind of in that, but like, Anthony Lynn, I think, is kind of the perfect example. A guy who has every right to kind of be upset right now, and not a lot of people would even blame him for just be like, you know what? If you don't want me calling plays, then what am I doing here? I'm like, please let me go somewhere else, or let me just take the rest of the year off. Instead, like, he's bit his tongue. He's continuing to not rock the boat and do what they're asking of him, and that speaks to a really high character of a culture in here. And I guess maybe it's culture shock for me coming from the previous regime, but to me, it's just, it makes it so this team is so much more easy to root for right now because there are so many good people in good places. And so just kind of having that as a fan, to me, I appreciate that. I appreciate having people that I can root for, that I don't have to have like a guilt because they have an off-field issue or because, they're standoffish with one of my coworkers or anything like that. Like, it really feels like there's just good people in this organization, and that has to count for something.
Yeah, right. I mean, I know, Ant, you had a tweet today about culture versus wins and urban specifically, which is why I mentioned it. But what did you say with that? Because I want to be refreshed.
I think it's just as vital. I think, installing a culture, especially in your first year, the way that you are going to go forward as a coach, it's vital that you get your methods across, you get the team behind you. And you've seen this year, they may not be the most skilled team in this league, but they are pulling 150% for one another, and they're playing better than the sum of their parts in points. I mean, we could have 4 or 5 wins pretty easily if 1 or 2 plays go in another direction, and you mirror it to a situation like Urban Meyer. I mean, you saw so many guys saying Campbell's going to be fired before him, etc. Urban Meyer fractured that organization from the outside right to its very heart. And that's what happens when you instill a bad culture into your side. You're not getting along with your players, your coaches. Yeah, you might be sneaking a win along, but you got a generational quarterback in the draft. He had a little bit of help there. But you look at Dan Campbell, and which team would you rather have right now? You would rather have ours, because the Jaguars are in complete and utter disarray. But Campbell, if in his first year, if all he does is get a successful culture installed, he's got the work ethic there, the attitude, that is a great, springboard forward. You can't win without it, I don't think. So
No.
that's the most vital thing we've seen this year. And, you're just seeing players, as have already been mentioned, who are stepping up and playing. We've seen the levels of player development you've not seen in years under Matt Patricia. Your Evan Browns have come in and played really well. Charles Harris, who people thought was on his way out the league, has come in and is performing magnificently. It's all players, undrafted free agents, veterans are coming here and they're playing better. And they've shown with Jamie Collins, they will not accept these slack, lazy veterans anymore who aren't pulling their weight, which Patricia did. So the culture is as vital as wins for me. We might only have one in the win column, but we've got a much bigger win, and that's the culture set. And that is what it's going to be like going forward.
I mean,
that's what I meant to buy it.
There's a trope, isn't there, during draft time, which is when the Lions draft a guy, cue the flurry of tweets going, well, that's the end of his career. And yet, in the last couple of weeks, especially since the win in that celebration, which, Herman said yesterday, I really hated it. And it's like, okay, fine. We've only got one win, and that's you're allowed to hate that. But pretty much every national media commentator starts saying, well, guys are going to want to come and play here. And, that's maybe a theory which lasts a few days. But if enough national media guys start saying it, maybe it is actually going to seep into the national conscience that if you come to the Lions, maybe you don't get it in the win column. But if you want to get paid after you leave here, well, you're going to become a much better player if you come here. And if that starts happening, that seeps into the mind of these guys. This team's going to go from strength to strength because of that reputation. So it's starting from a good place.
Exactly. And I know we already spoke about this the other week, but the celebrations, I think they're perfectly legitimate in what they are. It sort of legitimizes the regime. They've got the first win under the belt from a difficult situation. But I mean, a lot of people see what they want to see. For years, the Fords were said, oh, they don't care about the team, they're not getting involved. And then one is in that locker room congratulating everybody, celebrating, and then it's like, oh my God, it's embarrassing. People see what they want to see so that they can complain about it. And I personally loved seeing her in there. Yes, it's just one win, but that one win represented so much more than just a single victory. It was I think the final legitimacy of this regime. It gives it legitimacy. It is learning how to win now, as well as installing culture and developing players. And that is the next step, is getting a few more wins under the belt and getting the winning culture installed.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not like it was a contrived sort of victory celebration where it was like the guys were like, okay, we haven't won one, but when we do, we're going to tip the Gatorade over his head. And it's like, oh, God, when a championship win happens and the Gatorade comes out, I'm like, oh, okay, but you're just doing it because it's a trope on every other win that's ever happened. Are you actually displeased? Like, I can't believe that Bill Belichick likes that, and I can't believe his players during that run actually thought, well, this is fun. Like, they just had to do it because that's what's expected of them. But the celebration was not legitimate is not the word I want. It was authentic.
Genuine,
There
yeah.
was nothing inauthentic about what happened, and you know what? You may like it or not, but they believed it, and I believe that. So
Yeah.
there we go. Tom,
to me, it's silly that whole thing became a negative around the lines because, I mean, not only was it the first win of this regime, it was a walk-off win, which walk-off wins just don't happen that often. Like Jared Goff said, that's never happened to me. I've never had a walk-off win like that. And so to win on a walk, like you see walk-off field goals, and that's different, right? That's different than scoring a walk-off touchdown on a 75-yard drive with no timeouts. And considering everything this team has gone through, losing on 66-yard field goals, losing on 54-yard field goals, missing overtime kicks, like, yeah, there can be a little release of energy after that. I think that's okay.
Yeah.
I think we can be okay. I think we can understand from a human element what it probably felt for a lot of those players who had been working their butts off for months and months and months and hadn't shown it pay off in a moment.
I mean, in that drive as well, a false start when they're trying to hurry up as well. I mean, that felt like the end to me. But, oh my God. Tom, you had loads of questions, and maybe we can get one more in, and then we'll start focusing on the game, and we'll be here all night, which I would love, but
Yeah, we should probably move on. Very briefly, then you can bring one quarterback to Detroit 2022 season: Matthew Stafford, Justin Fields,
oh, no.
or CJ Stroud. You technically can't come in by then, but basically mystery door, young quarterback, or who might possibly be your hero.
Is this for one season?
Well, we're starting from 2022 with our current roster, right?
2022 and beyond then.
And beyond.
Ooh, oh man, I think I might go Justin Fields. It's either Justin Fields or Matthew Stafford. I'm not ready to crown any college guy yet. Justin Fields is really fun to watch, and you've seen a couple incredible throws he's made this year that really, I mean, I feel like if the Lions were to somehow have their hands on him, and this isn't me trying to criticize them for taking Penei Sewell or not taking, the Panthers trade in the Matthew Stafford trade or anything like that. It just, he brings so much excitement to the game, and you can see it with Chicago fans who have every reason to be miserable right now because they're stuck with the head coach that hasn't turned around that offense yet, despite having some pretty good weapons over there. They're excited. They're still feeling pretty good about the future of this team once they kind of get rid of everyone in the front office. But yeah, and it's because of him. It's like solely because of him, because he's an electric player. He checks all the boxes of a modern quarterback, a guy who can run, a guy who can throw on the run, a guy with a cannon arm. And, he just kind of has to put it all together mentally. And I think he will, unfortunately for Lions fans. But yeah, I think he would be the guy that I picked just in terms of longevity and in terms of excitement he would bring to the team. I love Matthew Stafford more than I think just about any other Lions fan. So it's hard for me not to say him in this situation, but there is something about the bright, shiny new object that would kind of fit with what the Lions are trying to do here as well. So he's my guy.
Yeah. Fortunately for the Lions, perhaps Justin Fields might come into his own when the Bears are in the midst of a breakdown and then he's on a vet deal. So, not all
That's a good point, yeah.
Last question from Ash, just because it's probably the last question we'll ask, and then we'll move on to the Arizona game. Have you ever been to one of the London games for the Lions? I think it was 2014 and 16. And if you haven't, or if you have, are you going to come over the next time the Lions play? Would have been last year, might be next year, COVID accepting.
Yeah, I haven't. I've only been to Europe once, and it was part of my birthright to Israel. So the answer to the second question is absolutely. I would absolutely take the opportunity to go to London to cover the team. I wasn't credentialed the last time the Lions went to London to play, so I would have just gone as a fan, and I considered it, but I was also not in a great financial situation in Los Angeles. It's kind of expensive out there, so I was in money saving mode at that point. So yeah, I mean, I would definitely go at the first opportunity just to kind of see what it's like over there, because obviously there's a pretty big Lions fan contingent because they were one of the first teams over there and played an exciting game or two over there. So yeah, absolutely, I would go if for no other reason, just to visit London, because as I said, never even been there. So
yeah,
on my list.
Less said about that Chiefs game, the better, however. Let's move on to the news, actually, because we haven't talked about that at all, and then the Arizona Cardinals game. So there's been a lot of roster moves since we last spoke with you guys, especially in the secondary. So they've signed cornerback Savion Smith off of off waivers, Shaka Brown and Chris Williamson to the practice squad. They've also signed safety Brady Breeze off waivers. Hawkinson's gone on IR after thumb surgery. He's done for the season. Jalen Elliott's on the COVID list, bringing it back up to 9, 8 of which are secondary players. Centre Evan Brown is off the list, though, however, and assuming he doesn't get COVID again, will play this Sunday, hopefully. Nickelback AJ Park is expected to play after returning from IR. Those are all the kind of roster implications so far, but I mean, there's still a couple of days, so anything can happen, right? I mean, we could field an entirely new secondary for this, and given the lack of experience we've had so far, but also given the coaching staff, is it a major cause of concern for this Sunday compared to what we've been used to? I mean, I can't help but feeling it can't be a massive step down because of just how depleted we've been all season, right? And what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. The secondary changes every single week at this moment in time, but I'm glad to see AJ Parker back for one. He was doing really well before that injury, and it was such a shame that he went onto IR. But this is a good opportunity for some guys to get in there and stake their claim now. So obviously, if he's back and playing, which is huge, hopefully he's able to have a good end to the year. But this is just an opportunity for guys now. It's like with Brock Wright. He's now got a big opportunity now. TJ's had to really stamp himself as a tight end too and put himself in the plans for next year. If he can do that, one less hole for us to fill. We've filled a lot of depth holes this year. As long as we get, these guys signed up to contracts, I think this year we've surpassed what we can really have expected from finding new guys here in terms of depth. So, yeah, go out, fight for your place. There's no Hopkins this week, which is a big one, but there's still a lot of dangerous receivers come in. So, but we've seen a culture that it's next man stepping up and doing his job. Even McCullum last week, he had a shaky start, but he did all right. So, I trust them to bring up guys who are going to work really hard, make some plays, and we'll see what they can do.
Yeah, I mean, we've already talked about how Evan Brown is higher rated than Rack now in pass blocking, which is frankly incredible. I mean, run blocking is a completely different animal, but, for a guy who, I mean, when we first started this off, we were told in pre-season that the backup to the offensive line was one of the worst in football, perhaps not worth having, and, we're going to need to replace everyone. And then we've had 2/5 of a reserve line, or 3/5 of a reserve line, performing, I mean, top half of the NFL, which is exceptional. And Hank Fraley is got to be up there for
contract.
Well, yeah, right.
He needs a 10-year contract.
I mean, the Steelers are going to be back, aren't they? Sniffing around them again. Just every single year, come to us. Because, I mean, that team needs it more than ever, too. So, let's move on.
They can go elsewhere.
Yeah, right. Just briefly, they'll come back to you, Ant, for this. The NFL insider Josina Anderson said on Wednesday that the Lions are targeting Thibodeau at 1 for 1 overall. I know what your thoughts are about 1 overall or wherever we pick, but what do you think on that? I mean, it was shot down fairly quickly by MCDC, but I will point out that he said, I haven't talked to Brad yet, which is not the same as it's not happening. And I know that anytime Dan is asked about roster moves, he just says, well, I don't know. And basically, you should speak to the other guy, as opposed to saying it's not happening. So I think that the media saying he shot it down is actually not quite the story here.
I'd be shocked if they've made a decision yet. I don't think they have. I think they've spoken to someone who's gone, this person told me this, and they heard it from this person. There's a very long way to go yet. And you think about this season in general. At the start of the season, Spencer Rattler was the number 1 pick. Then it was Kayvon Thibodeau's the number 1 pick. Now it's Aiden Hutchinson's the number 1 pick. It could change again in that time. You've got combines to come. You've got the Senior Bowl. You've got the bowl games. You've still got a lot of opportunities for players to insert themselves into that discussion there. And I think quite rightly he's just said they've not had the discussions, because I don't think they will have. I don't think any team, unless there's a generational quarterback sat there who's made their decision on the first pick in December. So, I hope we still, like you said, I still hope we win a few and we don't have to pick it. But I
sorry, did he say pick it?
No. No.
I heard it.
No. I'll not pick it. But no, I don't expect them to have made a decision yet. Absolutely not. Someone's just said something. It's been taken as gospel. They're going to do their due diligence. Brad Holmes had a good draft last year. I expect him to overturn every nook and cranny looking at these players before making a decision. It's a long way away from here.
Twitter has a very short memory, and everyone's already thinking about the Ohio State game and all the little clips we're seeing of Hutchinson, and obviously it looks incredible. But coming into the season, Thibodeau was the number one player. 4 weeks ago, Thibodeau was going to be the number one pick. They're not going to be as reactionary as fans are, and therefore they're going to be not only in no position to say where they're leaning right now, but also they're not going to be changing their board every time there's a new clip or a new 6-second kind of tweet on what Hutchinson's done and his work ethic, etc. That's just not how this works. So not only is it a kind of ridiculous statement in the first point, but we're just not at that stage as much as Jeremy and I know you want to get into mock draft season, and we're just not there yet. We're just not there. You're going to have to hold on.
I mean, this for me smacks of John Dorsey. The king of the smoke screen, just getting to work early, trying to muddy the waters. No one's going to know what's happening. They're going to know everything's happening apart from the thing that's happening. So that's my theory. He's getting to work early. I mean, he's not the GM, so yeah.
Conspiracy theory, I love it. Let's get those out.
What did we have? We had a comment from One Pride 40 said, Jeremy, do you see another win in this team? Let's just slip this in now.
I think it's possible. Yeah. I mean, we've seen them be competitive against most teams this year. Obviously there's been a few blowouts here and there, but I don't think the Atlanta Falcons are particularly a great team. I think they could certainly take them on the road. And I don't know about Seattle. Seattle's a tough place to win just in general, but they certainly aren't the team that they have been in the past. They're horrible defense still. So, maybe that's a game in which the Lions can score more than 20 points, and they tend to do okay in games in which they score more than 20 points. So, yeah, I think those are pretty much the only two games that are winnable. I don't think they're, not to get too ahead of ourselves, but I don't think they really have a chance this week against Arizona. And then I think the Packers are probably still going to be playing for seeding in week 17 or week 18. And so that seems like a tough hill to climb as well. So I think they can pick up one more win. I would be surprised if they go 2-2. I don't know if I'm predicting them to go 1-3, but it certainly wouldn't surprise me.
And you're getting a bit of love in the Twitch chat with people saying love your accent. So just that you should know.
Appreciate it.
Move on to that Chris Spielman piece on Pride of Detroit from you, Jeremy, actually. And about what he was doing. So more specifically, so he's meeting with ownership every Tuesday, giving his views on the game. He's helping coach the linebackers, not during practice, but before and after, giving them like extra reps or tips and hints and what have you. He's helping out Brad Holmes at the college scouting. And he's also selling tickets directly to the season ticket holders, which I found insane. Like, can you imagine being just like a Common Garden season ticket holder and there's, oh, hi, it's Chris. But, okay. Hi, Chris. What are you doing here? Like, I can't imagine that. I've gone on to the Lions before. I've gone on to LinkedIn to try and get an in into the organization and kind of have a contact in there. And the number of people I can see who are just basically their main job is selling season tickets. And it's like, okay, they have a dedicated department to that. And then Chris is like, hi, guys, I've come to help out. Like, that's so mad to me. What was your impression of the whole thing? I know you said he's a completely selfless guy, but is this what you imagined he was going to do when he came in?
I mean, I didn't have any idea, honestly. It was kind of you kind of assumed he was only kind of going to be involved in the football decisions at some point, because Lions fans had been begging for someone to help them with the coaching search and help them with the GM search, a guy that wasn't Ernie Accorsi, obviously, someone who knew football and cared about the Lions. And so they got that guy in Chris Spielman. And he said in the interview, that was the first thing he did. He was a one of a 4-person panel between him, Sheila, Rod Wood, and Mike Disner in making the decisions for head coach and GM. And after that, he was just there, and they're like, okay, well, we got to figure out a way to use you. And they're basically using him in every single way possible. And yeah, I think that's definitely interesting that he's involved in the business side of things. But at the same time, like we've heard from ownership, like it's really important to them for everyone to be on the same page within the organization. And that really comes through in this interview. He talks about, we put in a fitness center at Ford Field so that all the people that are working are there feel like they're part of the Lions family, because they are part of the Lions. And so again, it's kind of that weird, harmonious, like awesome relationship that everyone who has Lions in their resume, they're part of the team. They get to know everything that's going on. They get to feel like, Chris Spielman is their coworker, which is a weird thing to say if you're, cleaning the bathrooms or, anything. Like Chris Spielman is going to be there, part of the organization, part of like making sure that everything is running clearly. And every time I hear something like this, all I think about is Washington. I think about the Washington football team and how rotten to the core that place is and how people don't like working there and people feel uncomfortable. And I feel like the Lions are really making a concerted effort to be the opposite of Washington. No offense if there are any football team fans in here, but like it really feels like they are head to toe trying to just scrub this organization clean. And again, like that makes you proud to kind of be a fan of this team, whether the wins are coming or not, because it does feel like they're doing it the right way. It does feel like they've got the right people in the right place. It's just a matter of getting the personnel on the field and getting the coaching staff where they need to be to produce wins. But it just having everyone in the building, and I hate to make the Ted Lasso comparisons because that's what I feel like everyone does these days, but it just that the positivity around everywhere, just it feels good to have it here. And whether it sticks, if the wins don't come, obviously that's the real test for an organization. That they've weathered the storm of year one pretty darn well, I would say. But when Lions fans are still feeling pretty good, and when if that changes, if the wins don't come next year, toward the end of next year, or especially if they don't come in 2023, that's to me like that is really going to test the foundation of this culture. But so far, like Chris Spielman seems to know what he's doing in building a business, building a team, building a culture, and that really comes through to me in that interview.
Yeah, I mean, I know Ted Lasso isn't as popular here, mainly because Apple TV is not that easy to get if you don't own an Apple product. I mean, you can't get it on a smart TV or on a PC so you have to own a Mac or an Apple. Like, it's so frustrating. But I've watched it and it's amazing. I'm sure that he's based off Jurgen Klopp. I don't know if Tom and Ant might agree, but I don't know how many people actually know soccer, but I'm a fan of Liverpool. And the idea of this kind of mustached guy coming in, hugging everyone, learns everyone's names, makes the culture feel like it's all kind of one team pulling together, down to the cooks and the cleaners and what have you. It's like the Lions were like, well, we want that guy. And that's what they've got. So I couldn't be happy with that. And also with Urban Meyer's firing, move on to that. So Darrell Bevell, second time interim head coach, 2 years running. And I mean, I don't know whether you guys saw the little 9-second snippet of him being asked the question of, well, you've got an opportunity of winning more games now than Urban did. And he just cracks a wry smile and then hides his face as he tries to stop laughing. I mean, it's shocking to me. I mean, what a situation he's been in. So Bevell, I never really thought that highly of him as an offensive coordinator. I didn't think it was that inventive, but he always came across as a really nice guy. And to go from Patricia, who I think was probably a nice guy, but seemed like a hard ass, moving on to Urban, who's clearly just a jack off. Like, gotta feel bad for that guy now walking into a situation where he's the head coach of Trevor Lawrence. Like, that's insane to me. And I mean, I really hope he does well, not only for our draft pick, but just because I like him. I mean, what a situation for him.
I want to ask him which season was worse out of the two of them, working for Patricia or working for Meyer. Paul, he needs a holiday after this, bless him, after working with these two guys.
Him and a bunch of guys in that room, like, Kyle Caskey, the former Lions running backs coach, is over there. Obviously Marvin Jones and Jamal Agnew, those are guys. I mean, they all made decisions, right? Like it was their own decision to go over there and play for Meyer, but that doesn't mean they deserve to be treated like apparently they were. I mean, poor Marvin Jones, man.
Yeah, right. Okay, let's actually move on to the game, because that's why we're here. This is what we're going to do. So, Lions Cardinals on Sunday in the betting. Lions 9-2, Cardinals 13-2 on, which I think is the worst odds I've seen all year. 12.5 point spread, 47 over under. So I think it's the highest scoring spread I've seen for sometimes for a Lion game. So I imagine they probably reckon with our secondary it's going to be 47-0, maybe? I don't know. We'll find out, though. On the injury report, I have that open somewhere, if my links actually want to reload. So obviously we said that Hockenson was out. Also not a practice today. Will Holden, non-injury related. Jonah Jackson, Julian Aquara, DeAndre Swift. I mean, Swift potentially going to go on IR and be locked down for the season, but we'll find out. Alex Anzalone was back today, which is really great news. We've also got Michael Brockers, Jalen Reeves may have been limited in practice, and I think Jalen's still non-contact, so second straight day of that. Not looking too good for Sunday, really, I don't think. Josh Reynolds also appears on the report with a thigh, which is not great considering he wasn't on there yesterday. But we've got Derek Barnes, Austin Bryant, and Penny Sewell back. And Bryant, actually, I think is going to be the big one because we're lacking in the outside linebacker room right now. And he only played 8 snaps last week after his sickness, or was it injury? I can't
Shoulder and illness, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's going to be really big. The Cardinals, their website is awful. They're only showing the Lions' injuries on their website. Thanks for that. Came to you for your injury report. Obviously, Hopkins out for the rest of the regular season, which is not great. They've also signed Brayon Borders from the Tennessee practice squad, apparently as cover for Alford at cornerback. And they're obviously missing J.J. Watt. He's on injured reserve for the season. I'm not aware of any other major misses at the moment for the Cardinals. So they're fairly healthy, actually, really. Let's see. So the Cardinals are 10-3. They are perfect away from home. 7-0 away from home. 3-3 at home. So not great that we're at Ford Field for this one. Would have better chance in Arizona. Pro Football Reference says their expected record is 9.2 wins compared to their actual 10. Football Outsider says 8.2. So potentially a lucky team walking into the situation per those metrics. They are first in the NFC West. Their last 3 games, they beat Seattle at home 23-13, beat Chicago in Chicago 33-22, and then obviously Monday Night Football, short week for them. They lost to Matthew Stafford and the Rams 30-23. This is the really mad thing to me just off the top. And I think it highlights the difference in the metrics in terms of the expected wins. By DVOA, they are 6th in the NFL, 19.6%. But by PFF grades, they are 18th in the NFL. So the disparity is massive. And I was actually discussing with Tom why I think that is, and I'll come on to that a little bit later. But what do you guys think about why there's such disparity there in what people think of the Cardinals statistically?
It's a tough question to answer. Yeah, I don't know. Like to me, I value Football Outsiders a lot. I value something that, like, if you want to just be a very basic statistical consumer, I would say point differential is probably one of the biggest ways you can just tell if a team is good or not. And I think they're 5th in point differential or something like that. And the thing that I found out looking, kind of doing my research for them this week, is just they just take care of business against bad teams. Like I think 8 of their 10 wins have been by 2 possessions or more. They're really one big slip up was against the Panthers, where they got blown out, oddly enough. And that was, I mean, I feel like every NFL team was allowed one really bad game this year. And that one, they didn't have Kyler Murray in that game. And I think that was Cam Newton's return game to Carolina. So, I think you're willing to maybe just push that one aside. And so to me, like, I think this is a pretty darn good offense. I think they're 4th in points scored and 4th in points allowed. Like they're well-rounded, and I'm not sure what PFF is a tough site to kind of congest, because sometimes it feels like they really confirm what you see and what you think, and then sometimes it's just like, what? That's not what I see at all. And you don't want to like completely trash their methods, because I do think they have a bunch of smart people working over there and that do know more about football than a lot of people give them credit for. But at the same time, there's no perfect like score metric for you. Can't just say like, well, that guy was he's a 78.4 in that game. Like that, you're making up metrics at that point. And so I guess I like PFF more for their statistics and their grades, I guess is the best way to put it. And so I don't know. I guess I didn't even realize that they rank teams by overall grade, which I guess would make sense. But that's what you're referencing. Their overall grade is 17th.
Yeah, 18th. So their 18th. PFF grade overall is 78.8, which is okay.
Seems fine. Yeah.
But yeah, so when you go onto like the team overall screen, it ranks their overall. Yeah. So here's my theory, and I will talk about the offense first, and I will do in a minute. But I don't think their offense has actually improved massively. And I think this is reflected in the stats, and this is why it's going to explain what's happening in their statistics. So they're scoring a lot, but they're the best situational team in football. So on 3rd down, they're 6th on offense. On 4th down, they're 4th. In the red zone, they're 3rd. It's an incredibly good offense when it comes to crunch time. 1st and 2nd down, who cares? But 3rd down, 4th down, red zone, excellent. On defense, 3rd down, they're 4th. 4th down, they're 3rd. Red zone, they're 18th. But, apart from that, exceptional football team when it comes to the crunch. Very well drilled and, belt and braces, and they're going to go and do it. The big difference there is that their defense hasn't been good, and suddenly, statistically at least, is so much better than they were. So on offense, their DVOA is 16th overall. Despite the fact that we think Kyler Murray potentially might be an outsider for MVP, I don't think he will be MVP. And actually, one of the questions I was going to ask you is who is your choice right now, but boring question. On defense, the DVOA is 4. I don't think anyone would come out thinking that this is a really great side defensively. And I know that you spoke with the Believe in Lions former
Ed
NFL
Smith,
Ed Smith yesterday,
yep.
and he was the secondary apart from Budda Baker is not great, and they've got a couple of guys on the D line and a couple of linebackers who are being productive, but actually the defense isn't what the team is known for, and yet if you look at it statistically, the defense is balling out. So I think that's the big difference, and defense is not stable. If you listen to what PFF say about things, the offense is a thing which actually carries you forward, but situationally they're great, and the defense has gotten better, and that's just the difference from last year, and that's why they've carried on this great streak. So as a big kind of broad brush thing, that's my theory. Any thoughts, and Tom?
I don't know. It's an odd one with the thing there, but I think the main thing is they play in an incredibly tough conference. So when you're playing against elite teams week in week out, I know San Francisco maybe not been the best recently, but you're still playing against some really top-notch players. So I think it just makes they're a really good side. Me. You do PFF a bit more than me. I go via the eye test, and I've been a fan of Kyler Murray since day one and when he was drafted. And I see a quarterback who's just come on absolute leaps and bounds there, and he's got some good weapons with him. So, they have gotten better this year. That defense does look better because the defense last year was trash. That's why they struggled, even with Murray doing well, but they just couldn't keep points out. But it looks like this year, they have changed that a little bit. But as you say, the secondary is weak. A good quarterback like Matthew Stafford did expose it greatly the other night, and there are weaknesses there. But no, I just think overall, their schedule's not been the easiest, like I say, either. So that could explain why they're getting the wins there. But because you're coming up against some higher teams, PFF might be grading them a little, well, not unfairly, but it's harder to get the good grades against some of these good teams because you're coming up against really good players. I think that might be why.
Yeah, I'd be surprised to see them go really deep into the playoffs or win the NFC, for example. But I think, Jeremy, you touched on it too. They kind of take care of business. And the problem is when we move on to the Lions, I don't think there's that many guys we have that can really exploit anything on their team, to be honest. They're very well-rounded. And not to go too miserable as we come into this, but I think it's going to be less around the Cardinals being a fake of what they are and more around what can the Lions do to try and keep it close.
Without going too deep into the stats, they're third in net yards per attempt in passing, fourth in points per game, and first in rushing touchdowns, which I thought was quite interesting. Pretty high in turnovers and interceptions. I mean, Murray takes a lot of risks, so that's not surprising. Pretty high in sacks too. But I mean, he's Russell Wilson Mark II, right? Just the new improved version. He likes to escape the pocket, run, throw on the move. So you're going to get the Russell Wilson-esque problems, and that's fine. He does very well with that. Kyler Murray is 8-2 this season. He's missed 3 games. Colt McCoy came in and went 2-1, which was actually really impressive. Passer rating 106, quarterback rating 61.5, PFF grade of 84.7, which I think leads the offense for the Cardinals. And otherwise, their weapons aplomb. So you've got James Conner, who has obviously been a revelation since coming there. I mean, exceptionally similar statistics to being at Pittsburgh, but I think when your quarterback is Kyler Murray, if you're that sort of bruising running back, you're going to have better success than if your quarterback is Ben Roethlisberger, and you don't have to account for him in the running game. So I think naturally he's going to have more success. He has taken the starter reins from Chase Edmonds, who's been on IR. Chase started every game he was active for, and Conner then came in, which I find weird because Conner's the bruiser and Edmonds is the... So I would have started Conner. I mean, there's a very similar running back room to the Lions. So you've got Swift and you've got Williams. That is what teams like to do in the running back room. Edmonds, not so highly ranked by PFF compared to Conner. Not as productive, frankly, in the system, and yet has a higher yards per attempt, which is odd. But There we go. But coming to wide receivers, obviously we talked about the fact DeAndre Hopkins is not there for the rest of the season, but he actually hasn't been there for much of the season compared to their leaders in receiving yards. Tom, and do you know who their leader is? If you've seen a lot of them, you probably do know, but it's not necessarily the expected person, I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, you've got Kirk, you've got AJ Green there.
Yeah, is it Kirk?
Yeah.
He started hot, didn't he? He started really hot in the first few weeks.
When he was really hot on Monday, too. Couple of really nice deep catches. AJ Green is second. They're leaving out Rondale Moore, who hasn't really done much yet, and he's still going to absolutely set the world on fire when he does. And then they've got Andy Isabella still to come, who I'm sure the Lions will find out in this game that he is actually still worth something, because I just kind of fancy him to kind of make the team based on Hopkins not being there, and then he'll just pop up and burn us for one. And then Zach Ertz as well, acquired by trade, 7 games, big red zone threat, looks somewhat revitalized from coming out of Philadelphia. I know that he was distraught from leaving, crying during his press conference, and yet comes in here, model professional, and in fact probably is better than he was earlier on in the year. So, I mean, who do you double in this team? I mean, none of those receivers by themselves are actually world beaters outside of Hopkins. So, I mean, pick your poison, right?
And I think it's the underneath stuff that really worries me. In fact, we talked earlier around the secondary and the injuries, the fact we're probably going to have new names taking reps out there for the first time, but it's the front 7 which is my concern. And can we keep Murray in the pocket? We're obviously beat up on the edge. Can we keep contained? If he gets outside, we're in trouble. It's the underneath stuff. It's can we track Christian Kirk with kind of dig routes and things like that. Rondale Moore, those kind of guys. I'm less worried about the outside, to be honest. I think we're going to get beat up inside. And if we don't get any pressure up the middle, which we've struggled, let's be honest, over the last few weeks, Levi hasn't necessarily come on as much as people would have wanted. So unless we get in Kyler's face, I just think that's where it could be a long Sunday.
But the problem we've had, and we've had it all year, and we've mentioned it time after time, is because the secondary is so young, and in this case, really, really inexperienced. Aaron Glenn is protecting them. You know, he's keeping his safeties high. The linebackers aren't blitzing so much. You've got to protect your young guys out there. And with all these speedsters knocking around, I don't think that's really going to change. And it doesn't help your defensive line when it's getting no support whatsoever to get to the quarterback. And that's where the problem is. And that's what needs solving in the offseason. We need to have a secondary that we can trust and get on with the business while we go and chase the quarterback down. So, you know, I can see, you know, the issue is going to be there even more this week with the starters out. So it's going to be a big problem for sure.
Yeah, I think you guys nailed it. I don't know if there's anything I can add. I mean, I just think I think Tom's point about the edge rushers being really thin is really where I was thinking about this matchup a lot too, because I don't know, I just go back to that Minnesota game a couple weeks back, and I know they won that game, but I feel like the play action that they ran, the designed rollouts, there was just no one staying disciplined on the edges and those plays, and Kirk Cousins just had all the time in the world to really pick apart that Lions defense for all 4 quarters. Like they really had no business winning that game with how well Cousins was playing against this Lions defense. And I just feel like Kyler can do a lot of the similar things and more, obviously. Like, he's a more mobile quarterback than Kirk Cousins is, surely, and he's got just as good of a wide receiving core and throwing Zach Ertz into that as well. So I am concerned about the edges in this game. I can't tell you anything positive about Jesse Lemonnier, not to pile on him. I mean, I'm sure he's trying his hardest out there, but he's not an NFL level talent in terms of a guy that you really want to be out there on a 40-50 snap basis. So it's a tough look for him out there, but you know, maybe Austin Bryant being more involved if he's healthy enough to play, maybe that helps a little bit. It doesn't look like you're going to get Julian back this week, unfortunately. So there are going to be some you know, reinforcements that they're going to have to play in that position, and hopefully Austin Bryant, you know, plays 95% of the snaps and gets 5 sacks or something crazy like that, because he seems to really be the only guy playing pretty well at that position right now.
I mean, the thing for me,
Harris is doing well.
Yeah.
Did I say I meant to say Charles Harris? I think I said Austin Bryant. I meant Charles Harris.
I mean, the thing for me that I've returned to over years, and I'm kind of not one who kind of says what happened last time and the time before, so it might happen again, because I just don't believe in that. The team that is here right now is the one that's playing. Having said that, in the last 3 years or so, the Lions have actually had more success against running quarterbacks with an arm rather than pocket passers who can sit in there and pick apart defense like a certain Bears quarterback that had no talent at all yet seemed to beat the Lions every time. Like, we always seem to lose to Trubisky, and yet when it came to playing Mahomes, it took a terrific fourth down play to the tight ends who went then handed it off when all looked won for the Lions. You know, like, that's what it took to beat us with that. And actually, you highlighted in your pod, Jeremy, yesterday that, or maybe not you, but your guest did, that the way to stop Kyler Murray is to, especially in a 3-4 system, have your outside linebackers play contain and your inside guys to get pressure. So hopefully the inside guys can get pressure, but maybe we're not asking Harris and Bryant to beat their man. I mean, maybe just hold the man there and be prepared to disengage to make a tackle and be prepared when he takes off. And if we're not asking him to beat the man, maybe we can trust him to do that, especially Austin Bryant, who sometimes has trouble penetrating, but is big and powerful and can disengage very well. So I feel like that might be okay. And then we're just saying to him, well, beat us with your arm then, which you very much can do. But he is a smaller guy and sometimes does struggle from the pocket a little bit, and you're just trusting to luck a little bit. But that seems better than letting him run for 15 yards every time. So I'm not sold on this being a total mismatch. It's just there's a 5% chance as opposed to a 50% chance. But hey, let's move on to defense now. As I mentioned, they're fourth in DVOA in the NFL this year so far, conceding only 19.5 points per game. In passing, their defense is fifth in yards conceded, fourth in net yards per attempt, so Goff is going to be perfect. Rushing, they are third in touchdowns allowed, so, you know, all great. Third down, they're fourth. They're only conceding third downs at a rate of 34.6% and fourth downs at a rate of 40%. In the red zone, not so great. 24 touchdowns and 40 trips. That's 18th. The lineup is full of star-studded people. So, Byron Murphy, 4 interceptions on the year, 11 passes defended, 48 tackles. Buda Baker, 3 interceptions, 4 passes defended, 74 tackles. Isaiah Simmons, who I know was a draft crush of a lot of Lions fans a couple of years ago, has actually started coming to his own. He's got 82 tackles from the linebacker position, 5 passes defended, which I think is roughly where Anzalone's actually been, but he's actually started to play really well in the running game. Marcus Golden and Chandler Jones have been fantastic as a tandem. They've got 19.5 sacks between them, with Marcus Golden actually having more. And I know quite a lot of Lions fans in the offseason were hoping we'd acquire Marcus Golden, and he really has hit the ground running there. So 4 forced fumbles for him as well. Chandler Jones, 22 quarterback hits. You know, this team has stars. If you talk about dude theory and, you know, the idea that maybe you only need 6 or 7 real star guys and you can fill it with depth otherwise, well, they have those guys on this defense. So, you know what, their secondary may not be all that, but they've got the players around you to make a play whenever, and it's going to be a real struggle for Goff to get something going. The saving grace we might have is the strength of that offensive line. Our tackles have been fantastic since they've come back. On Jeremy's pod, they highlighted interior pressure being a problem. Tom, do you think that that's going to be something Evan Brown coming back, and he's been excellent in pass blocking, but potentially slightly injured?
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, I think you said at the top that actually, whether it's their pass defense or rush defense, they're right at the top in both. Now, when you look at how they're made up, Golden and Jones coming off the edge, obviously strength in the secondary, coverage strength in Simmons at second level. I don't think we can stand back and pass 60 times the game and win. So we're going to have to establish the run, right? And I think if we can control on that inside, obviously, are we going to have Jonah Jackson? It doesn't look great. So that's a concern. But if we can kind of build a presence on the interior, start to run the ball, and ultimately we are going to have to score points. I really struggle to see a world where we're holding the Cardinals to 14 points or 16 points or 19 points, to be honest, right? So I think we've got to establish the run up the middle.
We bring teams down to our level. And what do you think?
Hey, we're good at that. And we always beat the spread. Always beat the spread.
Well, see, you just, you play to your strengths. And, the strength we found recently, putting your extra tackle on, putting your extra tight end in, running the ball. And we do it really well. And, that is just something we need to implement really early in this game. We've got, hopefully the running backs are coming back. Obviously, Jamar's going to be healthy, so hopefully he gets more of a look in. Reynolds has done really well. We've got the running back depth there. just, use the extra tackles, use the extra tight ends, and just run it on them. I back our tackles to go against their edges. Penai's doing, as well as any tackle in the league at the minute. Decker's slowly getting back up to full fitness and back out to where he usually is. I back them to do it. Vitai's playing well in the run game, creating some huge holes in there. I back them to have a good game against them, but you've got to establish the run early and just, do what we've been successful at.
I mean, Tommy Kramer wasn't a complete liability either when he came in earlier in the season, I guess.
To be honest, you've got Stenberg in there as well, and I don't know why he doesn't play, but Stenberg plays well in the run game. He's done it earlier this year. He can play in the run game. I know his pass protection ain't great, but I do back him.
I think he's on IR. Oh, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, is he? Is he out?
Yeah.
Oh, balls. Everyone's on IR.
Right. It's hard to keep track.
Yeah. I mean, 56 million on IR now, whatever it is. So, you can't be expected to know them all.
But
yeah. So, what do you actually think, Jeremy? Can we run the ball on this team? I mean, they will expect that, right? They should stack the box.
You'd think that's the strategy, that has kind of been the strategy against the Lions for a while now, and it hasn't necessarily worked. The Lions are still averaging 4-6 a carry this year, and I think that's about the number that the Cardinals are seeding this year. Might be even higher. It's like 4-7, 4-8. Which I know the DVOA numbers don't exactly match that, but I do think the opportunity is there, and I'm with you all. I feel like this is the route that the Lions are just going to have to go. The question is, how long are they going to be in the game, right? Because this is what they want to do every week. They want to run the ball and stretch out possessions and keep Kyler Murray off the field. Like, all of that sounds great in theory, but if Jamar Jefferson fumbles the ball or Jared Goff throws an interception, gets sacked, like, suddenly the game plan is thrown off, and suddenly Kyler Murray goes up 2 possessions, and you have to figure out a way to throw the ball too. And with no Swift, with no Hawkinson, and the passing game is showing signs of life, at least. Amon-Ra's obviously come on recently, and Josh Reynolds seems to have given some sort of spurt to the offense that they were missing downfield. They got chances there in the passing game, but I do agree with you guys that it has to be the run game. It feels like the only way towards a victory, unless and we brought this up on our podcast, unless the Lions are planning on pulling out a full bag of tricks again this week, which I mean, they might, because we know Dan Campbell just doesn't go quietly into the night. We know he's looking at this team. He knows this is a 10-3 Cardinals team that's very talented on both sides of the ball. So maybe he's like, all right, we got to do it again. Let's pull out some special teams craziness. Let's pull out a couple fake punts, maybe a flea flicker or two, and we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised to see that this week, because it doesn't look like there's a lot of great matchups in this lineup. And even though I think they might be a little vulnerable on the run game, like you said, Matthew, I think the Cardinals know that that's what the Lions are going to try to do, and so they're going to try to take it away.
I mean, I think that should be countered then. So if that's what they might do, I mean, the thing that was highlighted by Ed yesterday was that in the one game they really struggled, the offense came out essentially throwing a load of screens, and doing loads of quick passes effectively as an extension of the running game. Maybe some running back screens to out of the backfield as opposed to wide receiver screens. And I'm looking at this thinking, well, Anthony Lynn should be calling this game. Like, it's perfect. We can do that. We've shown we can do that all year, and it hasn't worked. But if that's where they're weak, then why not do it? Sorry, Ant, I interrupted you.
No, I was just about to say, if we can somehow find a way to stay in this game for a little while, you have to think they've had a day less. Well, they've had a day less to prepare for this. They played after we did. But the thing is, after losing that Rams game, now they're only one game behind them. There's going to be a lot of pressure on them. And if we can somehow find a way to hang in this game, then I think that could entirely work in our favor, because, they are trying to protect the lead in that division, and they're trying to still get the number 1 seed in the NFC. So, there are opportunities. If you find a way to stay in this game, maybe, that nervousness could be a factor there on them. They're missing their top guy on offense there. It's up to guys who aren't as experienced to get across the line, and no one expects anything of us. You saw it with the Vikings a few weeks back. The expectation was all on them to win, and they kind of cracked in there. They just couldn't put us away. They gave us too much time to go back down, and they didn't take us seriously. So maybe you can see a situation where that happens again.
Maybe, and yet I come back to the situational football, and when it actually comes to the crunch,
Yeah.
they have stepped up to the plate. So that's what I fear. I'm going to move on to special teams and then talk about ways to win, which is actually what we're talking about right now. So on special teams, it's a good solid unit. We're very aware of their kicker, Matt Prater, 20 of 25 so far this season in field goals, 42 of 43 on extra points, and 77.6% touchback percentage on kickoffs. So don't expect too many returns from the Lions on Sunday. Punters Andy Lee, super solid punter for a long time now, 42 punts this year, an average of 49.9 yards per punt. Okay, ways to win. So we've kind of been dancing around this the whole time. We've talked about pounding the rock, which you guys think. I want to see play action early, which actually they've kind of done quite a lot. But if they're expecting the run, well, don't give them what they're expecting then, even if it's just a short dump off from a play action, but keep them away from Goff. But for me, I think one of the things we have to do is just to win the battle up front. So whether it's the run or the pass, the offensive line is absolutely key, and without that, we have no chance. I don't know about the interior of the Cardinals' defensive line. I don't know about you guys. We've talked about their edges. Are they strong in the interior of their defensive line? Because, I mean, that's why we were talking about where we might lose the game, is if they get some push up front. But who are their guys up there? I actually honestly don't know. But if that's how they're going to win, well, who are they? Can they actually win that way?
It's an okay group, I would say. Like it's Jordan Phillips, a former second round pick, a veteran. He's playing pretty well this year as kind of their main interior guy, and then next to him, Corey Peters. That's right. Okay, so also kind of an old veteran guy. They're not as young and spry, I guess, in the interiors. They are on the edges with guys like Chandler Jones and Marcus Golden, but I would say they're just kind of an average unit. And honestly, like I think the linebacking core is obviously always important when it both comes to protection and the run game. Isaiah Simmons, a guy that we've already talked about a bunch, is kind of a dynamic player, even if his PFF grade isn't necessarily up there. Because I don't know, PFF and linebackers, whatever reason, doesn't seem to really ever match perception. Including
Zaven Collins, who's been benched and yet is our highest ranked linebacker.
There you go.
So bizarre.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to make sense to me, specifically at the linebacker level. But I think it's potentially something the Lions could take advantage of. But again, like we're talking Tommy Kramer, we're talking Evan Brown coming back after missing a week. Like it's not the Lions' strength either. It's really strength for strength on the edges, and then just kind of like mediocre versus mediocre in the middle. And it's kind of, I feel like it can really go in either direction, which is obviously probably a positive for the Lions, because I do think those edges tend to be a rough matchup for a lot of teams. But I think the Lions are maybe one of the few that can neutralize it with the way those tackles are playing right now.
Yeah. Okay. So how about prayer? That's always an option, but this Cardinals passing attack is fearsome, and the secondary we have. I mean, who is actually going to start? So at safety, we're going to have Will Harris moving back from the slot.
Yeah.
Thank God. I mean, get him out of there. And Dean Marlowe, I presume, is going to be the other safety. At cornerback, we have. Why have I forgotten his name with all the interceptions? Oh, there we go. So I have dogged on Amani all season, and I think I'm going to continue to do so, because for all his interceptions, which 4 of them were thrown straight to him, one of them, the most recent one, was fantastic. But he seems to be in the right place, and that's great. But I don't know, he hasn't done much to do them, but he seems to get burned, as Tom was talking about, over the middle. When he's asked to go sideline to sideline, that is not something he can do. And on the opposite side at corner, any ideas? Is it going to be iffy? I mean, is
he healthy yet?
He's still on the COVID list at this point, so
he's still on COVID. So.
But I mean, he could be. I mean, you never know. Like he could come off. We don't really know. Like I think Parnell. I'm trying to remember these guys' names at this point. I think is it Parnell?
Mooney?
Motley. There it is. Yeah. I feel like I heard one coach mentioned his name this week, and so I'm like, okay, I guess maybe he's CB2. Like I don't know who it is. Like there's just no options there after Jacobs sadly went down this week. So I mean, it's going to be a guy that we don't really know much about, if I'm being completely honest.
not even Roby Coleman. And I mean, we don't want him. But yeah. I mean, Mark Gilbert came in and looked really good, and he's gone. And Bobby Price came in and didn't look good, but he's also gone. I was like, oh my god. So that's going to be a real struggle against that passing attack. I mean, I said let's contain Kyler Murray and put him on his arm, and that sounds like a terrible idea. Let's let him run. So I don't know what to do. But containing Kyler Murray's legs, I've mentioned situational football. So it's situational football. They are top 6 in every category apart from red zone defense. So how do we, in those crucial moments, be disciplined enough to do it? I mean, the Lions have been disciplined in the last 3 or so games. They've really worked on not committing too many penalties, which was a real struggle earlier on this season. But when it comes to actually performing on those 3rd and 4th downs, how do we do this? I mean, it's one of those things where I feel like it's a Sugsfang in chess. So any move you make is a bad one. Where you are is where you want to be, but you must do something. So what do we do, guys, against this passing attack?
And I swear I'm being crazy negative today, but I mean, situational football has not been a strength of the Lions this season, let's be honest, right? In fact, the only real negative question marks this year on the coaching staff has been situational moments, and 100%. Players going out there and actually making a play. It just hasn't happened. And we talked earlier around the energy and enthusiasm when we did get that win, because actually we had a 75-yard drive. We had a situation where we went and delivered, and that was a huge surprise for everyone watching. So I think we've got to be careful not to kid ourselves that we can really rely on guys stepping up in the situation. I would love to see it.
But then you have the fact that Dan Campbell is the coach with the best 4th down decision rate for increasing your win percentage, or some crazy stat I saw recently. I mean, I think it's just a function of him going for it all the time. But and teams don't do it enough. But it does seem like teams should be a lot more aggressive than they are, and we're perhaps just a bit closer to the line that you should be, even if it's almost reckless at this point. But he went conservative for a while and has come back out the other side. And yet in that Rams game, when we did go over aggressive, it worked. So it's not like it doesn't work all the time, but maybe it's more about picking and choosing, because it seems like when he goes into a shell, he really goes into a shell and doesn't go for it at all. And when he's going for it, he can't stop himself. And where's the happy medium? I want Dan to kind of drink like, it's like Goldilocks, right? He seems to have too much caffeine or not enough caffeine, but maybe the right amount of caffeine could be really good.
But that's what this season's about. It's about him figuring out his style as a coach, when to go for it and when not to go for it. So, you've seen in recent weeks, it's been getting better. So it's all part of the process, really. This is just him figuring out style and the situational awareness for him, because he says he's got a guy who sits there, writes down all the notes for him. He goes over them all again, sees what he'd do differently. He's obviously trying very hard with it. But, in terms of this Cardinals thing, you saw against the Rams, the way they move the ball, Connor's integral to that. But how they've always done it is they run the ball a lot on you, put themselves in good situations, and then just air it out to these receivers they've got. You've got to try and somehow collapse their run ability, and put them in some longer situations to put pressure on them. That's where you've got to do. And, we say we can't do it off the edges, but if you can't do it off the edges, then look to your interior defensive line. Use your guys in there, try and make some headway through there. And I mean, the first thing you do there is you play Aleem McNeil every goddamn snap, because I'm sick and tired of seeing Nick Williams and Michael Brockers be levered out all over the place. They're no good in there whatsoever. Aleem is really good in there. He's a great run blocker. Put him in, play him. You can get after quarterbacks. You've just got to go really aggressive in your interior instead. I think that's got to be the thing. Something has to change there, because they will just get bullied again on Sunday, those two, if you use them straight off. But you've got to somehow nip that run game and stop Connor or Edmonds, if he's back, putting them in favorable situations all the time. That's just how they run it on you.
Yeah, and they obviously have a lot of room to improve after last week, where they were just getting toyed with up the middle in that game, and that was frustrating to see. And part of that, I think, had to do with everything that they went through that week. Levi and Aleem didn't practice at all because of the flu, and the Lions were shorthanded at linebacker. They might get some of those guys back this week. They might get Anzalone back. They might get Jalen Reeves-Maven back, depending on how far they progress in practice week. And I think that those aren't top tier players, but they're better than the guys that they were in there. They're better than Josh Woods. They're better than even Derek Barnes at his level right now, I think Jalen Reeves-Maybin and Alex Anzalone are probably better than where he's playing right now. So I think that can definitely help with getting the lines into better down and distances by stopping the run games on those early downs.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see him being used a bit more. I mean, so if he's being a bit of a liability in coverage, well, let's use him off the edge then, because we actually don't have many edge players there, and that is actually one thing he can do is get after the quarterback. So let's use him as a kind of Devon Kennard style blitzer from the linebacker position. I mean, and you watched a lot of his tape, and you identified a few things. Derek Barnes.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, tell us a bit more about his ability to get after the passer.
Well, see, Barnes' ability is to find the gaps in the line when they're created. But to be able to do that, you have to create gaps in the line. You have to put the big, heavy, beefy guys in there who are going to create the rushing lanes for him to get after the quarterback. So, it's a bit of a two-way thing here. But, I do want to see him blitz more. We've been saying for ages, we want to bring the safeties up and blitz more. There has to be some times where, and I know Aaron Glenn's been conservative because he's protecting the young guys in the back, and I get it. And it's working, but there just has to be sometimes when he just has to trust them a bit more and just go for it. Barnes' style is getting into the backfield. He does it so effortlessly at times because he will find the gaps. So use your strengths. I think that's the thing, especially with a guy like Kyler Murray. He can hunt down quarterbacks quick. And Murray, if anything, like we've said, he's mobile. You're going to need guys who can get after him with speed to make him uncomfortable. And this could be the perfect thing for Barnes if you utilize him correctly. We've seen him getting in the backfield for tackles for loss recently. You've seen that style of his game start to come out, and that's where he is at his best. So, really trying that interior to create the gaps for him to go and exploit.
I did ask for some final questions as we're kind of coming towards a close, and one Pro 40 really wants to know the answer to a question that I know is going to just piss Jeremy off, but I'm going to ask it anyway because it's the last one that I've been asked, and it's, what do you think of all the Fire MCDC stuff? I don't want to ask it, but I'm going to.
I mean, it's fine. I realize it's part of what makes fandom is when the team's not winning, you want something to change, like a coaching staff. And listen, I'm not going to sit here and tell you Dan Campbell's been perfect in year one. He hasn't. We mentioned the situational stuff. I do feel like he's been a little bit impulsive at times, whether it's being overly aggressive or overly conservative. Like I said, it's been inconsistent, and I think part of that is just kind of an impulsivity. Part of it is him trying to figure out. I agree with Ant on that, but I do feel like sometimes he just gets like a little too giddy, like, oh, we didn't make like one example that I know the guys at The Athletic point out a bunch, and I think it's a good example. It was in that Rams game where they faced a 3rd and 1 and they ran the ball, they didn't get it, and so Dan Campbell rushed them all back on the field, run the exact same play, and it gets stuffed again. Like that feels like a little bit of an impulsivity where it's just like, let's think this one through. Let's make sure we get the good call. And the fact that in some of these high pressure situations, the lines haven't been very good. Yeah, I think that's a reason to maybe be a little bit concerned. Like that's how games are won in the NFL. Like once you are a good enough team to compete every single week and you need those wins, you need those high pressure moments, that's where your coaching staff really shines. And it hasn't been a strength of this coaching staff in year one. Now they've got a lot on their hands right now. They're doing a whole bunch of other stuff. Dan Campbell's taking over play call duties and all this sort of stuff. So I think you give them a year one pass on that. At least I'm willing to give them a year one pass on that. But then you look at everything else they're doing. We talked about the culture. We talked about the young guys who wouldn't even be playing on other rosters improving. We talked about these replacement level guys like Evan Brown, like Jerry Jacobs, like every running back that's playing right now, and seeing that they're playing hard. They're making a case for themselves. They really care that they're out there. Part of that is the coaching staff getting those right kind of guys in the place, but obviously the coaching staff being able to motivate these guys and give them the opportunities and coach them up, and to have them playing above their level speaks to everything that Dan Campbell is doing. And I know he's not the ones that's necessarily teaching technique, but he's the one that starts it all. He's the one that hired the guys around him. He's the one that had the vision of what he wanted this culture to look like, what this coaching staff to look like. And that's kind of integral to what's happening right now. And I do think they're the positives right now outweigh the negatives in what I've seen from this organization. And to just rip that all apart after year one because you don't like the fact that he called a run or a pass on 4th and 1 seems ridiculous to me. Like, allow the guy to learn a little bit, allow him to get players that can make it so that he doesn't have to go for it 6 times on 4th down in a single game just to keep it close. Allow just his vision to come together. Like, the only reason you would ever tear a team apart after 1 year under a new head coach is if he does something like Urban Meyer, if he's kicking his players. Like, if he's not kick, like, I know that's a low bar to set, but like, if you're not kicking your players, let's at least see how this plays out.
Yeah.
Is that too simple?
I'd say that's a good rule to, like, anywhere in life. Just don't kick people and you deserve to stay.
Yeah.
Or don't hire people and then tell them they're worse coaches than a Bowling Green, which is just insane. Like, I really think that Urban Meyer must lack some sort of self-respect, because he is ultimately responsible for that, and is the classic sort of workman blaming his tools thing. Like, come on, man, you are the guy at the top of the organization. You hired everyone, so it's on you. Like, Dan Campbell goes so far the other way that it's almost funny that everything is his fault. Nothing else is anyone else's fault, apart from Anthony Lynn, kind of by inference, but, never mind about that. Actually, there was one question that someone asked that I thought was really interesting from ages ago. So you talked about Ben Johnson, the tight ends coach. Is he, right now, the front runner for offensive coordinator next year?
I think he is. Yeah, I do. It was interesting. This week I was just like, because usually when you go out to practice, you're really just doing one thing. You're taking attendance. You're seeing who's there and who's not there. And obviously this time of year, it's important because a guy
one knows.
We lost a guy from COVID, I feel like, every day for the past, 2 weeks. But for, 5 minutes, I just sat and I watched what Ben Johnson was doing. And like, he is in there. He is like, he's talking to the quarterbacks a heck of a lot when they're just running drills with wide receivers and tight ends. Like, Mark Brunell is 10, 15 yards away. He is right there with the quarterbacks. And I don't even know where Anthony Lynn was at the time. So like, absolutely, I think he's the guy that it almost feels like he's the offensive coordinator right now, with the way at least practice is being run, and obviously with the way everyone in that locker room is talking him up, whether it's the coaches or, I thought Jared Goff said something to 97.1 this week where he's just like, yeah, that guy's going to be an offensive coordinator 100%. So yeah, I would say he is the front runner. And that might not have a lot of people excited. Everyone likes, outside hires and a fresh new name, but I'm interested to see what he can do, because it certainly seems like he's made a difference in these past couple weeks. It's not like the Lions are scoring 30 points a game now, but there's a noticeable change where it finally seems like some of the things are clicking that we've been waiting for them to click.
Do you boys got any final questions? I know we had a long list, so maybe do you want to pick one more, perhaps?
Can do. I feel like we've been going a while.
Yeah, I'm gonna close it up in a minute.
Let's go really quickly. How would you grade Brad Holmes' first 12 months on the job? Because I think we talk a lot about Dan Campbell, and I don't think Brad's necessarily been perfect. So he's been here 12 months. What grade would you give?
Yeah, maybe like a C plus B minus. It's it's really tough because a general manager is really going to make his money with the draft, and we're still trying to figure out how this draft class looks. Obviously Panay looks really good. Obviously, Amon-Ra is playing pretty well. We're still kind of waiting to see on Aleem and Levi and Ifatu. The whole not taking a quarterback in the draft thing is something that's going to be up for debate for years to come. And I'm kind of somewhere in the middle on that debate, but the Lions got a pretty good guy with that 6th pick or 7th pick or whatever it was in Panay. So that, in terms of the draft, I think promising start so far, but we'll see. In terms of free agency, I don't think he did a particularly great job. If we're being completely honest, obviously the wide receiver stuff was kind of a mess this year. And, but they managed to find some undrafted guys. They managed to find some guys in the middle of the season that have helped out. So, I think, again, there's maybe a little bit more good than bad, but with the general manager, I feel like this is something that you really can't properly evaluate until we're a couple of years down. And especially when you're talking about an offseason that was, you have no cap room, you don't have a lot of draft capital, you're purging guys because you just have to with their contracts. So it was kind of a uniquely tough situation for Brad Holmes to be put in. And so I'm really interested to see what he does with this upcoming draft and upcoming free agency.
Yeah, and I think that the kind of Brashard Perriman, Trinity Benson, those kind of things, which are easy to take shots at, they're not really decisions that are going to make or break the Lions in 2023 and 2024. What it is bringing in young talent. And
Yep.
I think we're looking more promising there than, like, say, free agents and things where we get to this offseason, the next offseason, a bit more money to spend, where actually you really have to put your hand in your pocket. That's where we've got to deliver. So that's the bit I'm intrigued by.
All right. Jeremy, is there anything that you want to say at the end of all of this? Anything that you've got coming up on POD that you want to chat about? I know you'll obviously have your post-game stuff on Sunday and what have you.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I don't need to promote Pride of Detroit. Why don't you guys just stay here? Follow the Twitch page here at Roar the Lions. I think you guys are doing some fun stuff. I try to catch your Twitch streams as much as I can, because you guys are already like months into the draft, which I don't know how you do it, but you guys have an entire draft show, which I think is smart and awesome. And so if you're watching live, if you're listening on the podcast or watching on YouTube or whatever, make sure you tune into the Twitch channel, because as I said at the top, like, Twitch is so much fun. It's a whole different experience of consuming Lions content. So come on over here.
Thank you very much. And you actually did the college podcast yesterday. So what did you speak about again? Just remind us.
We were just looking, obviously the bowl games coming up, so we were looking at those, and we were looking at the recruiting classes and the transfer portal, just see where players are landing on that. We're going to start on the draft stuff in a little bit, but there's still a long way to go yet. So, yeah, me and Ryan just having a competition on the bowl games at the minute. But we're starting tape review, though. So I've said, if anyone wants any of it, we'll use caddies, we'll cut it up, we'll go onto YouTube, we'll do that. So, yeah, there's anyone you want to look at, we'll do it for you. It's all good fun.
Yeah, hit us up on Discord or on Twitter if you want to have anyone to look at in particular. If Caddies Cut Ups does have games of theirs, then we will absolutely review them for you. Next episode, on Monday the 20th December, Cardinals at Lions review. If you want to watch along with us on game day, then we'll do something there. And, sorry.
No, I was trying to say, I'm just about to die now. I think my battery's nearly gone. But I just want to say, well, first, obviously, really thank you to Jeremy for coming on the show. It means a hell of a lot to us. We've followed you since the very beginning, since we did all this, and it means a lot for you to come on the show. So thanks. But thanks to everyone else who's listening in, who's tuned into the shows, because obviously we're 100 in now. When we started doing this, 15, 16 months ago, and we had about like 3 people listening to us, and most of that was us going back and listening to the episodes. We've put on, it was, and Steve and his mother and all that. But we've put an ungodly amount of work into trying to do this and make it out and get to episode 100. It's just we couldn't do it without the people who listen in to us and interact with us, and especially to all of all the guys over there in America who have taken us on and really give us the time of day, because we're just a few Brits at the end of the day talking about a game in a different country. So I just want to thank everyone really for that. So I just wanted to get that in before I suddenly faded to black.
I mean, so it's 100 normal episodes, but it's not just 100 shows. I mean, so we've done the 17 college podcasts now. We've done, I think, probably
the rookie reviews.
The rookie reviews, 15 different interviews with guys. Jason Kavinda was one of the first people to give us the time of day, and now he's the Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee.
Great.
And I mean, obviously, like, he just came on really early on when we have absolutely no viewership, going, yeah, I'll chat to you guys. Like, that was the coolest. And Herman Moore yesterday, and go and check that out. 20 minutes of your time, which would be really worthwhile. But yeah, thank you to the listeners, to the viewers, and to the next 100, boys. It's going to be great. Roar the Lions UK, socials, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, the Facebook group for everyone not associated with us, but just to come and join in with a load of guys, especially some of us who actually come over to the States, called Detroit Lions Fans UK, One Pride Worldwide. And I'm going to get back to article writing soon, but it's that time of year for accountants where you actually have to do some bloody work, so apologies for that. It's a bad time of year for us. Tax return season, what are you going to do? It's going to be fun if the Lions actually make a playoff stretch, because I'm going to be swamped. But there you go. Anyway, thank you everyone for listening. Thank you so much to Jeremy for responding on Discord when I said hi, and for coming on for so long as well. Like, we really, really appreciate it. Cheers, Tom, for coming on. Been a while since we've seen you, and hopefully you'll be back soon. We'll see you next time on the Royal Lions UK podcast. Let's go Lions, One Pride.
One pride.
One pride.